All right, so 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone talks about it like it's fitness gospel. It's everywhere. Fitness trackers, apps, you know, even just like general chat about staying healthy. But like, have you ever stopped to think about where this magic number came from?
Oh, yeah. It's a great question. And you know what? The answer is probably not what you'd think. It wasn't, some team of scientists or big, important health study that came up with that number.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The 10,000 step thing, it actually all comes down to marketing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A really brilliant marketing campaign, actually.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Tell me more. Like, what's the real story here?
Okay, so picture this. 1960s Japan. There's this company called Yamasa, and they're launching a brand new pedometer. You know those things that count your steps?
Uh-huh.
And they called it the Man Pokai, which, get this, translates to 10,000 steps meter.
No way.
Yeah. They were super clever about it. They knew 10,000 was like this nice, round, easy to remember number. And honestly, it just took off like wildfire.
So wait, you're telling me a catchy marketing slogan basically turned into like this worldwide health thing? That's crazy how that happens. But okay, now I have to know, does hitting 10,000 steps even matter, scientifically speaking?
That's where things get even more interesting. We've got like a ton of research, studies, articles, all kinds of stuff about walking and what this 10,000 step goal really means for your health.
Let's unpack it all. Let's figure out what's fact and what's fiction here.
All right, so one of the sources that really stood out to me was this blog post from UCAN. They're a sports nutrition company, so they're really into, the science-y side of fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that 10,000 steps, sure, it's a good amount of activity, but it's not like some magic bullet. There's not like tons of hard scientific proof saying that's the perfect number for everyone.
So there's more to the story.
Totally. And that's because, well, everyone's body is different. You and I have different fitness levels, needs, goals, all of that. I mean, think about it. Someone training for a marathon, they're going to need to move way differently than, someone just starting to walk more every day.
Right, that makes total sense. You can't just lump everyone together like that.
Exactly. And that's where understanding, like, the real science is important.
Okay, let's dive into the science.
Yeah.
What does the research actually say about walking and, like, how many steps should we aim for?
Well, first we got to talk about this big thing. The average American only walks, get this, like 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day.
Really?
Yep, that's straight from the Mayo Clinic, so pretty legit source.
Okay, so we're falling way short of that 10,000 step goal then. At least, most people are.
We are, which is why it's super important to start wherever you are and just try to add a little more each day. Even small increases can make a difference.
That's good to hear. Small steps.
Exactly. And, when we look at the benefits of walking, remember, it's not just about the steps themselves. Like how intense your movement is and what kind of movement it is, that matters too.
Oh, okay, so it's not just about the numbers. It's also about how we're moving our bodies. Tell me more about that.
So think of it this way. A leisurely stroll around the block, sure, that's nice to get some fresh air, get moving. But a brisk walk, where you're breathing harder, maybe sweating a little, that's going to be different. It'll affect your heart and your overall fitness more.
Okay, so quality over quantity.
In a way, yeah. And remember that UCAN blog post, they really stress that. They say, brisk walking, running, swimming, even strength training, all that stuff can be awesome for your health. But just counting steps, you might miss those benefits.
So think about movement as like a bigger picture thing, not just steps on a tracker.
Exactly. And speaking of like overall health, let's talk about what walking can actually do for you. It can reduce your risk of heart disease, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, even depression.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I knew walking was good, but I didn't know it had that kind of impact.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how just moving your body more can make such a difference.
So how do we know how much movement is enough? Is there like a right answer, or is it different for everyone?
That's the big question, right? And honestly, there's no one-size-fits-all answer, but there are some good guidelines. Like the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, they recommend at least 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity aerobic activity, like brisk walking.
Okay, 150 minutes, that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
But how do I know if I'm hitting that moderate intensity?
Good question. You can use the talk test. Basically, if you can have a conversation while you're walking without getting too out of breath, you're probably in that moderate zone. If you're like gasping for air, you're probably pushing a little too hard.
That's a helpful tip. I'll definitely try that.
And remember, even if you can't hit 150 minutes right away, just do what you can. Any movement is a win. It's all about finding what works for you and building from there.
Okay, so we know movement's good. We know 10,000 steps isn't necessarily the magic number science says it is, and intensity matters.
Yeah.
What else?
Let's look at some specific studies that might give us more info about steps and how they affect our health.
Okay, ready for more.
Perfect. So this one study I saw, it was in an SBS News article. It said that taking even just 4,000 steps every day can really lower your risk of dying early.
Wow, that's a lot less than 10,000.
Right. It really shows how even small changes can make a difference for your health. And it gets even more interesting. They found that for every 1,000 steps you add on top of those 4,000, your risk goes down even more, all the way up to like 20,000 steps.
So basically, the more you move, the better.
Generally, yeah. But there's kind of a limit. Like after a while, the benefits of adding more steps might not be as big.
So there's a sweet spot.
I think so. It shows us that we don't have to obsess over huge step counts. It's about finding what feels good for you, what you can keep up with, and what actually helps you.
I like that.
Yeah, and this reminds me of this fascinating study we found in a file about, 10,000 steps. There was this 4-year program called 10,000 Steps Ghent, and it was all about getting people to move more. They tracked the people in the program for 4 years, and guess what? Even though the initial, boost in activity wasn't totally maintained over the whole 4 years, it actually stopped the decrease in steps that was seen in the people who weren't part of the program.
Wait, so even if people didn't keep doing 10,000 steps long term, being in that program still had a lasting effect?
Exactly. It kind of shows us that even a temporary increase in activity can help people build healthier habits that stick around and prevent decline over time. And this goes back to that idea that everyone's different. Some people might keep up a high step count, others might naturally decrease over time, especially as they get older. The main thing is any increase, even if it doesn't stay the same forever, is a good thing.
I love that. So it's about finding what works for each person and building a more active lifestyle. All right. Speaking of,
It's just amazing to see the impact even small increases in movement can have.
I realized we get so hung up on these big numbers, like 10,000 steps. It sounds so official and important, but
That's that marketing magic again. It's all about finding things you actually enjoy and making movement part of your everyday life, not just a chore.
so true. Movement shouldn't be something you dread.
Exactly. And there was this other study I wanted to mention. It was in a Harvard article all about older women and how many steps they
Hi,
took.
tell me. I want to hear about this.
It was a study on women in their 70s, and they found that the women who walked around 4,400 steps every day, their risk of dying too early was a whole 40% lower than the women who took 2,700 or fewer steps.
Wow, that's huge. So did walking even more than that help even more?
Yeah, their risk kept going down as they walked more, but here's the thing. The benefits seemed to level off around 7,500 steps.
Interesting. So it seems like that sweet spot exists, and it might be lower than we thought. Did they look at how intense those steps were? Like, is a slow walk as good as a power walk?
That's a great question. And yeah, they did. They found that the intensity of the steps didn't really affect mortality rates once they took the total number of steps into account.
So as long as you're getting those steps in, it doesn't really matter how fast you're going.
It seems that way. This goes back to what we were saying, do what you enjoy. If slow walks are your thing, great. If you like a more intense pace, that's awesome too.
I love that message. It's all about moving your body in a way that works for you.
And another thing, hitting a certain number of steps isn't everything. It's just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to being healthy.
Yeah, totally. What are some of the other pieces?
Well, what you eat is a big one. Getting enough sleep, managing stress, and doing other kinds of exercise like strength training.
So it's all about the big picture, taking care of your whole self.
Exactly. And remember, the research on steps and health is always changing. There's still so much we don't know.
That's why we love these deep dives. It keeps things interesting.
Right. And I have one more study I want to talk about. This one was in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology.
Oh, tell me about it. What did they find?
Okay, so this was a huge study, almost 227,000 people. And get this, taking at least 3,900 steps a day, which is less than 2 miles, was linked to a much lower risk of dying from any cause.
Wow, that's not even half of the 10,000 we're always hearing about.
I know, right? And get this, even just 2,300 steps was enough to start seeing benefits for your heart and blood vessels.
So really, just moving is the most important thing. Every step counts, truly.
Exactly. But of course, the study showed that more steps meant even better results. Each extra 1,000 steps beyond 3,900 lowered the risk of dying early by 15%, up to 20,000 steps.
That's really good to know. So 10,000 steps is a good goal to aim for, but it's good to know that even a smaller amount of movement can still be beneficial.
Absolutely. And this is a really important takeaway. Don't let that 10,000 number scare you. Any movement is better than none. More is generally better, but find what feels good to you, what you can stick with. That's what matters most.
I love that. So it's about finding what works for you, your own rhythm and sweet spot.
Exactly. And that might change as you age, your fitness level changes, all that.
So it's not about the number itself. It's about building a lifestyle.
Perfectly put. And that's the cool thing about movement. It's not just about hitting a target, it's about feeling good, being healthy, and enjoying the whole experience.
Yeah, I love that. It's not about being like obsessed with a number. It's about finding what works for you, what feels good, and just makes moving a natural part of your life.
Right. And it's so easy to forget that when we're, trying to be healthy, we focus on the goal and forget to enjoy the process.
Oh, totally. We can get so caught up in those numbers, hitting a certain target or whatever, that we miss the big picture.
Mm.
But I feel like when you actually start enjoying moving, that's when you really make changes that last.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about having a good relationship with movement, not thinking of it like a chore or something you have to do.
Definitely. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into 10,000 steps, what are some key takeaways? Like, what do you really want our listeners to remember?
Well, first of all, I hope we've busted that myth that 10,000 steps is like the magic number for health. It's catchy, but the science is way more complicated.
Right. And we've seen from the research that even less movement, like a smaller number of steps, can still be really good for you, especially if you're not used to being active.
Exactly. So don't be scared of 10,000 steps. Start small, find activities you actually like, and just try to add a little more each day.
And it's not just about the steps, right?
Yeah.
It's about how intense the movement is and what kind of movement it is. Like a brisk walk is different from a slow walk or a swim or a dance class.
For sure. And don't forget those other healthy habits, eating well, sleeping enough, managing stress, all that's important too.
About the whole package, right? Taking care of your body and your mind.
Yeah, totally. And, as we learn more about how movement affects us, I think we'll see more and more focus on finding what works for each person, not just following a general rule.
It's cool to think about how much this is all changing. Always something new to learn.
Definitely. And that's the beauty of science, right? It's always evolving. We're always learning new things, figuring things out.
So true. So as we wrap this up, what's like one last piece of advice you'd give our listeners? Something they can actually do.
Okay, if you're still feeling overwhelmed by step counts and all that, just try adding in more little bits of movement throughout your day.
Like what? What do you mean?
Well, think about those small chances to move that you might not even notice, like parking further away from the store so you have to walk a little more, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, walking around while you're on the phone, or even doing stretches or squats while you're waiting in line.
I love those ideas. They're so simple, but they make a difference.
They do. It's about finding those little moments in your day where you can move a little extra without having to change your whole routine.
Making movement just a normal part of life, not something separate you have to schedule in.
Exactly. And there's something really powerful about that. When you think of movement as a choice, not an obligation, it becomes something you can actually enjoy.
It's kind of funny. Even those little changes, like you don't think they'd make a difference, but they do. Like I started taking the stairs at work instead of the elevator.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel so much more energetic, like all day long.
Just those small things, they totally add up. And this whole 10,000 step thing, it kind of goes along with this bigger thing that's happening. Like people are moving away from all those strict fitness rules and, trying to find what works for them.
Yeah, totally. It's not about hitting these random numbers anymore. It's about finding something that you enjoy and can actually keep doing.
Exactly. It's about really listening to your body. What does it need? What feels good?
It's like anyone can do that, no matter how old you are, how fit you are,
Exactly. Health isn't one size fits all. It's a journey. And movement is a big part of that.
That's a great way to put it. It's about the whole process, finding the joy in moving and just appreciating what our bodies can do.
Love it. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into 10,000 steps. We covered a lot.
We sure did. Busted some myths, learned some surprising stuff. Hopefully our listeners are feeling inspired to rethink how they move.
Totally. And remember, health isn't about reaching some destination. It's a journey. It's about finding what works for you, making those changes that you can keep up with, and just embracing movement.
So keep those steps in mind, but don't let them rule your life. Find what feels good, listen to your body, and have fun.
Yes. Until next time, keep exploring, keep moving, and keep diving deep.